I've failed the day before I was leaving. And I borrowed this very pretty little laptop from a friend who's a sysadmin, but I said, everybody's going to make fun of me, it's running Windows. So in any case, so Linux, in all its different versions, as we all know, is a folk culture. And you learn tricks by watching other people work. And what happens with Windows, I think, is that you give people very powerful machines. You know, people buy laptops, they buy desktop computers, and they're incredibly powerful objects. And then you take away all the power from them, and you say, no, you have to do it the way that we want you to do it. Here is how you can do this thing. And people forget that they even have any power because they believe that they have to do it the way that they've been told. So over the last 30 years, over the period that I'm talking about, there have been different individuals who have contributed to this kind of geekier, more hands-on approach to knitting, kind of wresting it out of the control of commercial enterprises. And as I hope you can see, that does lead us to guerrilla knitting in the end. So Barbara Walker is really, I would like to call her a knitting engineer. She wrote 4 enormous books of stitch patterns. And in those books, she knit swatches like this, and she dissected them. She included written instructions for how to knit them, sort of stitch by stitch. And she also developed a charting pattern, a charting system, so that next to the swatch, there would be a grid showing you how to do it in pictures, so that you didn't even have to speak her language to do it, so that suddenly these knitting patterns were available not just to English speakers, but to anybody who could pick them up and look at them. So this enormous dissemination of knowledge occurred when she started doing that. This is a person who, Debbie New, who's just doing extraordinary work. If I could spend time with one knitter and try to pick her brain about how her mind works. This is a thing she calls labyrinth knitting. So as you can see on the left, it's just this pile of crap. And then on the right, if you lay out that as she has structured it, I don't have a pointer, but you can see there are all these little bends in the fabric. Those are knitted in. So in that thing on the left, I mean, this is like assembly programming. You know, you're doing this thing and you don't know what it's going to look like in the end. And then when you put it together, suddenly you have this object, and then you would sew all of those seams, and you'd have a square. On the left here is a sweater knit using that technique. And you can see you get this very complicated pattern going on in it that is exceptional, and that has nothing to do with what we think of as being sort of linear knitting. Nora Gahn is a woman who's been using a lot of natural or scientific motifs in her knitting. And she's not just sort of stepping in and saying oh, that looks pretty, I'd like to use it. She actually is a marine biologist who has become, first it was by night she was a knitter, and now sort of by night she's a marine biologist because she's become very popular in the knitting world. This is made up of a series of hexagons that interlink so that these complicated cables are the points of linkage between the different pieces. And again, this is very nonlinear. There's a tradition that's been growing of knitting things in Mobius strips. So this is a scarf that is a Mobius strip. It has one edge. This particular example was knitted from the inside out. So starting at one bit and casting off on the end. When you're knitting that around, it is, for a knitter, very counterintuitive. It looks as though you've made a terrible mistake and that your sweater or your scarf is going to come out inside out and all wrong. But that makes it fun because it's confusing and it makes your brain work hard. And I think that the results are beautiful. They're actually very functional. It turns out that the Mobius strip used as a scarf, drapes very well, so the topology helps there. I'm happy you like this image. This is a photograph actually taken by Phil Terone at a wonderful exhibit that was done at the Museum of Art and Design in New York City. One point that I think is especially interesting is that the Museum of Art and Design used to be called the American Craft Museum, and they changed their name because they felt that the word craft had developed sort of negative connotations and that they no longer wanted to be associated with that. And this is a thing that happened less than 5 years ago. And I feel like if they just waited it out, that it would have been okay, that craft really, right now is retaking its sense of being skill and technique and not being, just sort of, I don't know, tea cozies or something. Not that tea cozies can't be functional, but there was a lot of dispute about their decision to change the name. This is a gorgeous object. It covers a table that's about 6 feet across, and it is actually crocheted, which is an easier way to get these sort of three-dimensional shapes that the skulls are. And if I remember correctly, I think that the smaller motifs are all slightly different, which in the artist statement, the artist made a point of saying that this is not industrially produced, these things aren't exactly like each other. I have a choice to make where I can make these all be a little different. Dave Cole, yeah, isn't this awesome? This is his project. He knit, and as you can see, this was something that was featured on Make as well. Excuse me. He knit an American flag. This is at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art. It's 2 construction cranes, and I believe those are telephone poles. It took a whole day to do this knitting because constructing each stitch was incredibly time-consuming, of this sort of ballet of coordinating the 2 cranes so that they could go in and bring out this incredibly heavy fabric. One of the kind of physics aspects of this is that he had to figure out what material he could use that would support its weight, because on this scale that becomes an issue. And as you can see, it still does drag quite a lot. It's not sort of compactly knit. Another project of his that I adore are these teddy bears that he knits. This one is made of lead. The object itself is about a foot tall. And I wish I could remember what it weighs. Obviously, you weren't allowed to pick it up, but it was, I'm told, enormously heavy, and obviously also poisonous. One of the things that he's been enjoying doing is working with this idea of things that are knitted, and that give off an idea of being sort of cozy and comfortable, and yet are subversive. So this is a poisonous teddy bear. He knit an enormous one using the same pattern, using fiberglass insulation. So it's a huge pink knitted teddy bear that's about 8 feet tall and about 6 feet across. And if you were to tumble into its welcoming arms, you would be covered in tiny cuts from the fiberglass. So again, another subversive object. I love the scarf. On the right is a pattern that was called Yorick that was featured in Knitty.com. And an enterprising knitter decided that she didn't want a skull. She'd rather honor Cthulhu. So, so she'll get killed last. She did this and revised the pattern and gave it lots of little tentacles. This is a person who is putting patterns on Etsy. And I just really like all of his cephalopods. I think they're beautiful, and squids are the next pirates, so they're really fun. Here's some more weird stuff that people have been doing. There's actually a very small online museum of textile brain art. And the knitted brain on the left is my favorite of the pieces, although there's some beautiful other pieces as well. And then this knitted digestive system is really just terrific. The small intestine is, I don't know, it's charming in its kind of creepiness. This is a beautiful art project that somebody did for Burning Man. I'm not certain, I don't know if this was for 2006 or 2007. And so the artist wrote a pattern for how the leaves would be knitted. And she constructed this not on site, but in her studio at home, and attached all of the leaves to the tree that she brought to the playa. And in the close-up, you can see how they're all made from different yarns and by different knitters. And her point was that then, when they were on the playa, the way they were constructed is that they were not bound off. So you could unravel each leaf. And this is a picture from sort of in the middle of the process where the knitting itself is being unraveled. And I love how it's sort of about ephemerality and again, it just seems incredibly subversive to say, you know, we're doing this thing that you could use to clothe yourself, but we're just fucking with it for fun. And, you know, we're going to do this thing and then we're going to throw it away. But it's going to be really beautiful in the meantime. I love this picture. This is in Seattle. It's a statue of Lenin, and somebody knit him mittens. Based on what I was able to see on Flickr, it seems like the mittens have stuck around for a while. You know, I can't promise that those mittens are never going to get stolen, but it seems like people get that it's just really cool, and that it's this great prank, and that they want to leave them there. And, you know, that makes me really happy. Oh, thank you. Aw, I don't know if everybody could hear that, so a knitter informs me that the mittens do get stolen, but that there's a group of people who are continuously knitting mittens.
Yeah, there's also a group of people in New
York
she
can explain.
Who do it for the statues in New York. So there's kind of a subversive group all around the world that does knitted things on statues. There's a couple statues of horsemen in Central Park in New York. We've made knitted boots for the horses and scarves for the riders. It's quite hilarious.
So, that I can't tell you. You know, hippie liberal socialist Seattleites? I can't tell you. I don't know. But he does need red mittens, clearly. So the things that I want to finish up with are pointing out again that once you have control over what it is you're going to do with your tools, then you can be enormously creative and you're not constrained to do the things that you're told to do by society. And you know, that might feel like a really trite point to make, especially in a crowd like this, but what I love so deeply is that this message is getting through to the knitting community, which is often thought of as being kind of stodgy. I mean, there are all these stereotypes, and believe me, any person who knits has heard all of them. You don't look like a grandmother, or what are you doing knitting? Don't you have anything better to do? And, you know, if you're soldering a TV be gone, do you want somebody walking up and saying, don't you have anything better to do? Like, couldn't you be putting together something productive? No, you want to do your fucked up fun thing yourself without a lot of interference. There's a few tech things going on in knitting right now that I want to mention, two in particular. There's a website called Ravelry.com.